Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. So in this episode I will be replying to Norkel Corner and Russian Deadpool concerning the sentencing gap. So let's get stuck into it.
So the first thing he said was, I'm assuming this is a he, so if you are a female, please correct me, but whatever.
Hold on, let me check. Yep, I'm penis positive. Next.
This individual said, was responding to one of my comments saying, so you are saying you support males getting longer sentences for the exact same crimes committed by women. You are against fathers' rights. You don't care about male homelessness, male suicide, or male victims of domestic or sexual abuse, and you support genital mutilation of newborns because that's what MRAs like myself are fighting against. I guess that makes you part of the problem. First of all, I never said any of that. I never said anything about what I believe.
Okay, so this is a fairly common comment I'll leave whenever someone makes a video stating that men don't have issues, or men's issues aren't important, or that the men's rights movement isn't really interested in men's issues. I'll normally list a series of actual issues and then basically challenge the person to reply, and usually they reply in one of two ways. The first way is to actually acknowledge these issues, and it's quite possible, it's fairly common in fact, that the person is unaware of many or all of these issues, and once you point them out they'll reconsider and possibly even change their mind. The second response I tend to get is to diminish or dismiss these issues, and to basically come out and say that they're not important or unimportant, or just outright don't exist. So whenever I leave a comment like this, it's basically a challenge to the person who's made the video to respond in one of those two ways, and depending on how they respond is usually very telling as to what type of person they are. But let's see what he actually said in his original video and what I was actually replying to.
Yeah, and then you have these people like the men's rights movement that fucking comes about, and I can't fucking take the men's rights movement seriously either, because most of the men's rights movement, their whole movement is essentially all based on ad hominem, it's all based on strawmans, and it's primarily based on a lot of red herrings as well. I mean,
now I did timestamp my comment so he would know exactly what I was referring to. And if you're going to say that the men's rights movement is based on red herrings, well, I gave him a list of things which obviously aren't red herrings, but that's what we're about to go through at the moment. The first one on the list, of course, is the sentencing gap. So let's hear his opinions on the sentencing gap.
That men should get longer sentences, or that women should get longer sentences. That's not the point. I personally believe that women that commit the same crimes as men should get the same sentences.
Well, this is interesting because that's the exact same stance that men's rights activists have. We believe that men and women should get the same sentences for the exact same crimes. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So it's interesting that he originally referred to the men's rights movement as having red herrings when it comes to issues, yet the first one on the list he actually agrees with. Strange red herring, isn't it? Anyway, let's continue.
You know, I personally believe that if you have committed, murder, you should be given the same sentence. Now, whether that's premeditated or just spur-of-the-moment murder or manslaughter, depending on what frame we're talking about, you should get what that punishment is by law. So if that state law says that you committed manslaughter and it's 5 to 10 years, you should get 5 to 10 years. Regardless of sexual identity or gender identity.
And I would totally agree, which is one of the reasons why I'm a men's rights activist, because that's not what happens. Instead, men receive 63% longer sentences on average than women do. And this is after controlling for things like criminal history and prior characteristics and the arrest offence. Of course, if you're a black man, you're more likely to get a longer sentence still. But the gender sentencing gap is 6 times as large as the racial sentencing gap. So men in general are more likely to get longer sentences than women. And women are twice as likely to avoid incarceration if convicted. As you just stated, people should be sentenced based on their crime and the circumstances, not based on their gender. Once again, this is why it's a men's rights issue, because it's discrimination against men. Next.
The whole point is, and now, first of all, I'd just like to say this whole ideal too, this whole argument is kind of, I have to say, more of a red herring argument, because you are kind of trying to distract from what I actually really said. I'm not.
No, it's most definitely not a red herring argument. You clearly stated that the men's rights movement uses red herrings. I gave you the perfect example of one of the issues we fight for, which you actually agree with. Now, how exactly is that a red herring? I have to wonder. Now, I'm guessing it was ignorance on your behalf, that you actually didn't know about the sentencing gap, and now that I've brought it to your attention, you'll agree with me that it is a major issue which needs to be talked about and needs to be fixed. Unfortunately, the only people out there actually doing anything about it, trying to bring awareness to this issue, is the men's rights movement. And of course, people like yourself are standing in our way, which is why you're fighting against progress. You're actually supporting the status quo. Now, I must admit, I have heard one feminist mention the sentencing gap and condemn it, and that was Christina Hoff Sommers. And we all know she's not particularly popular in mainstream feminist circles, basically because of things like this. And in fact, there are a number of feminist organisations which are trying to widen the gap and make it even more discriminatory against men. Now, do you see why I'm a men's rights activist?
And yeah, so I personally believe that on the issues of on sentences, no, that I think men and women deserve the same prison sentences. So I don't know why you. I don't know particularly why you were making that particular argument.
And that would be the actual problem, that people like yourself are totally unaware of the sentencing gap, and you're more than willing to dismiss the men's rights movement without actually listening to what we have to say. Once again, you and your type are the ones fighting against progress and change, and instead are supporting the status quo, which is discrimination against men based on gender. Next.
No, if you commit murder, if you commit sexual violence, as much as I hate the idea that we have certain drug offenses and stuff like that, particularly on marijuana, you know, I think that people should be sentenced to the same thing. So yeah.
Okay, so let's listen to what Russian Deadpool of the Skeptic Feminists has to say about the sentencing gap.
To be fair, Anyone with an understanding of statistics knows that men are, to quote him, insanely more likely to commit acts of violence.
Well, status. Again, violence in your childhood. There's other factors. You're looking at one factor at a time. There's multiple factors.
Non-stop excuse making. Males are more culpable. Males do commit way more crime. It's 90% something above that. Way more murder, way more rape, way more everything, and that's obvious, painfully. So yes, males are a way bigger problem to humanity. The males commit more crime. They should be more. They are more responsible. Yes, we should be concerned. We should be prejudiced against males. We should profile males. How about those stats? Do you agree with that?
In some cases, yes.
In every case. They are the problem. Males. Young men. Let's be more specific. Let's get age-centric about it. It's not old males. It's not babies. It's young men. You. It's people like you. You're the problem. You and your 9 guns.
I've never hit anyone in my life.
Yet, with 9 guns. And a fucking bloodlust. And a chip on your shoulder.
We're not really big fans of atheism's unstoppable, or Rue, as we lovingly call him. But he does have some interesting fucking points, cushioned in hard statistical data.
So, if I'm to understand your point correctly, and by all means please correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying that if a person belongs to a demographic which has a higher crime rate, then that person should get a longer sentence based purely on belonging to that demographic, as opposed to being sentenced based on the particular circumstances of the crime. If this is actually your case, which is, I think, what you're arguing, then you would agree with black males getting longer sentences because of the high number of African Americans committing crime in America? Of course, if you do, I'm going to accuse you of being a racist, because that's a fucking bullshit argument. But you don't strike me as someone who's racist. I don't really know you that well, but you don't come across that way. So I'm going to go with the second option, which is you're being hypocritical and having a double standard. I'm guessing you would see discrimination based on race as bigotry, but you're perfectly fine with discrimination based on gender, because to actually criticize it would mean actually going against your ideological beliefs and admitting that men have issues that need to really be addressed, and men systematically are being discriminated against when it comes to the law and legal matters. This is, of course, the case of diminish and dismiss that we see all the time with feminists. Of course, if you're going to be intellectually honest, you would argue that women deserve longer sentences when mothers kill their children, because mothers are more likely to kill their children than fathers are. But I imagine you're actually not going to argue in favour of that. I imagine you would see that as discrimination, which of course it would be. And of course you bring up statistics. It's interesting, you say that men commit more crime. I would argue that more men are imprisoned for committing crime. You may not see this as much of a distinction, but if you actually take the sentencing gap into consideration, you will see that the sentencing gap is in fact responsible for such a high percentage of males in prison. I actually pointed this out in the video that you're responding to, and I've actually gone into it in much more detail in a past video, a link to which I'll put below. Anyway, until next episode, remember,
don't drink the poison Kool-Aid.
I'm not arguing with you on that. I'm not trying, but it is a red herring argument.